All right, let's go ahead and get into it. Today, I am joined by Krissa Santos. She is a Flatiron School alum that took our software engineering program, correct?
Yes, that's right.
Awesome. So let's go ahead and hop right into it and go ahead and just give us a little bit of what you do, what your role is right now, and kind of what field that you're focused on.
Gosh, I'm trying to remember like my entire timeline from before Flatiron to now. It's been a while. That was 2016. So as you mentioned, I could, consider me as an OG
Yes.
Flatiron alum or AKA an older one. Slightly embarrassing, but I mean, I was taking a pre-med course. I was studying public health back in college. And I just like a quick trivia of how I ended up at Flatiron was I think my best friend did start a nonprofit organization that helped kids in the Philippines, and she invited me to join her and help her out build the organization. And I think that just kind of triggered or like gave me a sense of, oh, I do like helping build things or build solutions for think problems that did matter. It does matter until today, of course. But that kind of made me pivot away from public health, pre-med school, going, taking the medical exam to be a doctor, to finding out how I can build those solutions. And I had no idea. I didn't know coding would be the path for me at that point. And then I started researching and Googling, and I found these I was looking for short programs or short courses that would help me build that foundation or foundational skills that I didn't have, because I was studying, physiology, anatomy, biology, and I didn't want to get to that path. And so when I stumbled upon Flatiron, I did see that software engineering program. It's like, oh, perfect. It's like 12 weeks. Um, and fast forward, I started leaning towards more product related roles, and I'm with Google right now as a product lead. So I can explain a quick, with through a quick line or two about what I do at Google.
Yeah.
But yeah. So half of it is product management. So it's helping drive and guide the team towards, product development through the different phases and steps of the product lifecycle, whether it's customer research to conceptualization of the ideas all the way to launch. And half of the role as well is, giving structure and increasing the understanding of the audience that's using the product of the team, whether it's operationalizing processes or whether it's creating feedback loops or creating empathy programs and pilots. So that's basically both of the main focuses of the product lead role that I'm at right now. But yeah, I'm completely new, so I'm super excited. I'm only like 4 months in Google, so we'll see where this takes me.
Nice. I'm sure it will take you many
Yeah.
places. That's very impressive. Awesome. To be able to work for such a large company like that in the tech space. So
Yeah.
let's take it back a little bit. I know you talked about how it sounds like you really switched gears in terms of going
I
down
did.
one path and then deciding to
Yeah.
switch over to tech. So
Yeah.
what really was it, or what were some of the deciding factors where you were like, you know what, this is the path for me. And then what kind of went into your
Yeah.
decision process when you were looking at how you were going to learn this new skill set?
At first I acknowledge that I'm gonna be bad at it. Like it's just a given. Like I think it's a hard. It sounds easy, but it's hard. It's like, you went through almost 4 years of your life trying to be an expert in that field, and then all of a sudden you feel like, oh, gosh, I think I really do want to pivot and maybe contribute to however whichever community you feel like should be worth contributing to differently. And at the time, I was like, it really isn't going to be med school. Isn't going to be in a hospital setting or a clinical, space. So it was just starting from a very vague, um, target or true north, if you will, of okay, the goal for me, and I feel fulfilled when I get to build solutions with people. And that was always it. I never, narrowed it down to like, oh, how do you build these things? Is it through code or is it through design? It's just, I left it as vague as it could be. And that kind of just drove me towards, helped me in my decision making, right? Like, does this hit this true north? Like, it does. Does it help me grow, in this role? It does. Does it kind of bring me to my next step, 5 years from now? It actually does. So it's less of, making your ego decide and being very fixated with the titles, and just having that overall, true north for yourself. Um, and yeah, it's always, I think it's been good for me so far. Like, I think it's hard. It's definitely hard because you're never gonna have the same story with people, so you can never, ask specific advice. So it's a lot of failed attempts and failures along the way too.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, let's talk about it. Failure. What have been some of
Yeah,
the
sure.
challenges that you've had in this journey?
Oh God. Let's see. Where can I start? Well, I was applying for App Academy and Flatiron School. So you guys remember this was 2016. So, you know, these are, I think, the top recommended schools. I think until now they are one of the top schools still. And I just, it was hard. Like, I had no idea how to make a loop statement. I didn't understand, how to do some coding algorithms. I cried on the first problem that popped into my screen because I couldn't answer it. I'm just like, oh, I don't think this is meant to be.
Oh
My brain is
no.
not, is not made for it. And I think just, accepting that you're gonna suck in the first few phases of your attempt, and that's okay. Like, the crucial thing is you just have to keep trying. It's a number of reps. It's a matter of reps until you get your flow going, and you get to understand what frameworks will help you and what tools will help you, versus if you're meant to do it or not.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of my some mentors and friends along the way really helped because they show that it does work. Like, if you put in the work, if you put in practice, it will take time, right? It will take time. And depending on which level you're at currently, like, maybe you've had some exposure when you were a kid to computers and tech. That's already a big, variable to how easy it is for you to get to a boot camp, or your exposure to, I don't know, computer science classes and programs with your brothers and sisters. Like, it really isn't just a matter of the skill that you have currently. It's also a matter of exposure you had in the past. And so, in terms of failure for me, like, I think App Academy invited me for a short boot camp like trial. I missed the cutoff by like 2 points. I think you had to get like 19 points over 30 to answer their coding exam or something. I failed there. I'm like, okay, well, that's not it. And I did a quick tour in the Flatiron campus there in Wall Street. And I'm like, oh, this is such a cool campus. Like, you feel the energy. I'm like, I just really want to get here. Like, I just really get in. And I remember I was really struggling with like the phone interview. Like, I think in my last, I had like a last coding problem. I really couldn't get it until the last minute. So even applying, it wasn't as graceful as people imagine it to be. It was like a lot of question marks in coding interviews. But then fast forward to job hunting, there's lots of rejections there, right? Like, whiteboard interviews, you can bomb it. Like,
Yeah.
you practiced so hard the night before. It's just that you woke up, with less energy, less focus. It can ruin your interview. But that doesn't mean it's a deciding factor for you whether or not to push through engineering or your journey to tech. But like, the biggest failure for me, I think, in the journey was when I got into LinkedIn. I got into an engineering apprenticeship, but I didn't get converted. Like, it was just so overwhelming for me.
Oh,
I think I didn't focus on, the learning methods and the learning styles that I should have focused on and owned. I was really busy, like, trying to, I don't know, like, just like blend in with the crowd. But I think that's one thing too. You're like, you're never gonna blend in with a crowd because it was a very unique space at that time. I think it was what, 2017. They were just starting to kind of tap this new pool of talent just coming from bootcamp graduates or self-taught learners. And there's a struggle between both sides of how do we communicate, and how do we kind of measure this unique pool of people who are so passionate about coding. And also, for me, it was also some kind of difficulty in communicating, what does success look like for you for these unique candidates. And I think to end my journey in my career. And that's always been my priority now, like making sure, you know, you have this alignment with your mentors or with your teams of what success looks like, how you're going to be measured. It's just like those basic things that I didn't think of back in the boot camp. All I knew was I wanted to make my code work. I wanted to learn how to code, but then there was so much other things as you join into the tech space that you need to be wary of. Um, but yeah, it's like lots of learning lessons. And then after that, I was like, man, I think I miss conceptualizing. I'm brought back to that memory with my best friend of like figuring out solutions for those problems that we were trying to tackle. And I kind of felt like I missed that part. So that's when I felt like I wanted to gravitate toward, I was pivoting towards product related roles away from engineering, which was more focused on implementing. Um, and then that's why I'm here.
Awesome, awesome. No, I love that. And, sometimes you have to, I think when people, they think about a certain career or a certain industry, they'll sometimes have one set idea in their minds. And so I think it's
Yeah,
important to kind of listen to the things that actually excite you or that you really enjoy
yeah,
about a certain role and to really lean into that. So
yeah.
definitely commend you for doing that and kind of finding your groove and into where
For
you
footing.
wanted to be. So, we kind of talked about challenges. So this is maybe a little bit similar, but did you have any fears or any reservations as you were kind of going into this of whether it's maybe I won't succeed,
Yeah,
or as a woman in
yeah,
tech, is there space for me, any sort of these
yeah.
concerns that they pop into your head?
Oh gosh, I have like a huge list of fear. I remember having this like short bond paper, like listing down all my worries before my first day.
Oh no.
And it was scary because I wasn't I also just moved from the Philippines to the United States then. I had zero experience of like what company cultures look like here, let alone tech companies or tech spaces. It seemed
Gotcha.
like it was very intimidating. Like all I knew was like, oh gosh, there's this like movie, what is it the internship? Like about Google. They had great food, but like these people were also smart and brilliant and like I wasn't sure if, I would fit in. I think that was mainly the fear and like how do I even keep up? Right? Like, okay, if I get my foot into the door, great. It's the bare minimum, work to get there, but how do I progress and how do I thrive most importantly in that space that was so foreign and new to me? Um, and also as a woman, it felt like, I was like, oh, I don't see much people like me in my
Yeah.
team. It's like it's hard to look for some peers to get advice from coming from your own POV or would understand where you're coming from. So, but then, through time, I think it's just really the fear of regret like outweighed numerous times the fear of failure, right? Like, even if it's gonna sting so many times, even if you're gonna be embarrassed in front of your team or in your meeting, or, if they have some kind of lingo or like tech lingo and you don't get it, like, along the way, just like I learned, yeah, with 2 minutes or 5 minutes of embarrassment, it's nothing towards, getting to your next step. And I think that just constant fear and trigger of like, oh God, I'm gonna regret if I don't do this. So you're like, whatever, I'm just gonna go for it. People I bet have been in this spot anyway. They weren't, they didn't progress into these great, perfect, or like brilliant individuals overnight. Like
Okay.
these are the exact same things that they had to go through and they powered through. So I think, that was kind of the experience I've had firsthand in tech. Like I'm gonna be bad at it. I'm not gonna be the best one in the room, and that's okay. Like it just always was the guiding principle for me of not letting your ego or your pride do the decision making because that's gonna be very dangerous and that
Yes.
might be a trap. You might get stuck, right? So that was a lot of fear going into the tech space on my first day.
Yeah. I love how I said, did you have any fears? And you're like, yeah, I wrote down the list.
It's a
But
lot, like yeah. Especially if you're a newcomer and you don't
yeah.
it was also really new to the industry then too. It's like it wasn't a thing to have apprenticeships. It wasn't a thing to hire boot camp graduates. It was they were taking a risk as well of figuring out what is this new pool of talent that seems like it's promising, but we weren't so sure yet of how to, structure them and set them up for success in this
Right.
space, because they were used to, hiring, for your typical universities that were great, like, Stanford or Berkeley or Ivy League schools, that went through the traditional route of computer science. And that kind of communication and vocabulary, or language rather, between companies and them were clear. It was crystal clear, but the communication with these other pools of talent might be a little more challenging. So I think that's also where the fear came from. Like,
Yeah.
we're both we're both figuring this out along the way, and we have kinks to iron out, but we'll see where it takes us in the end.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people can resonate with that, right? So, you saying that you
Yeah,
had a whole list of fears, I point that out not to make fun of that, but to say like that's
yeah,
real. You know what I mean? Like that's
yeah, yeah.
that's real.
It's
That's
not
what
as
so
graceful as it sounds, right? Like, oh yeah, I got into friendship and they got into tech company. Like, it is, you are sweating on your first day.
yeah.
It is hard.
Yeah. So as you're going through all of this, Did you did you have family and friends that were either going through this at the same time as you, or anyone else who had gone through it before you, or anyone that you could sort of say, okay, so and so
Yeah.
went through this path?
Unfortunately, no. I think that's why it was difficult. Because I think boot camps to me, when I just moved to New York, I think it's pretty new. I'm like, I don't know anybody from my family or friends who joined a boot camp or a short course program like this one. But I was just really checking, if the learning method and the teaching style really resonated with me, and it did. That's why I went for it. But in terms of support, my family means well. Maybe like half of them, like, oh, we don't know what you're getting into. Like, this is not your traditional route. Why don't you take another degree? Why
Yeah,
don't you study for 4 years? And they always come from a good place, but there's always some kind of fear with trying to tap into this new kind of learning.
yeah.
In terms of friends, oh gosh, I've gained wonderful friends in Flatiron. And if you struggle together, you guys form that support in the community that you guys don't have. And I think that's a common experience for people in that cohort, or like the earlier cohorts. Was like, none of my family or friends know what I'm doing or what I'm doing in the boot camp, but we do. And so that really helped people, progress and get through their careers after boot camp graduation. But yeah, to answer your question, 2016, no, not much.
Gotcha. And yeah, I mean, that makes sense. And it's so funny how things change, so
Yeah,
drastically in just a few
yeah,
years, right? We see so many
absolutely.
more boot camps have even sprung up that it's a lot of people have successfully kind of shifted their thinking to be able to see this as, a viable path and
Yeah,
a path that works well for a lot of people where your traditional 4 year university route, especially if you already have a degree that you already went
yes,
through,
yeah,
isn't necessarily
yeah,
an option.
absolutely,
So yeah,
absolutely.
no, I love hearing that, and I'm so glad that you were able to find, or to make friends and the people alongside of you. That cohort is sometimes your kind of right hand going through
Yeah,
a program like this.
yeah, yeah. I remember, I think it was like the last few weeks. I think it was just more of like, trying to find employees that match with you, and like going through this round of, whiteboarding interviews, or like speed interviews of like meeting different companies. Oh God, that was a scary week for a lot of us. We're like, we have no idea. It's gonna be our first time to interview with a tech company. But then, man, the support from that Flatiron cohort, and the teachers themselves and the facilitators were like, this is what you expect. This is the kind of fear that you might, be dealing with when you're whiteboarding. Use these tools that we've set for you, so just so that you're set up for a better likelihood of success in that interview. Um, so it's just like, yeah, it was teamwork. It definitely wasn't just like, okay, go your own now, and we taught you everything. It was like, even the last part of that race was like, people were guiding each other and like checking each other's code. Like, hey, does this look good to you? Or like, we're running each other's tests if it fails or passes, and it just
Nice.
Yeah, I can remember those last few weeks. It was hard, but then it didn't feel like we were alone at all. It was like a group effort to get people to their jobs or, to their next place.
I love that. That's so awesome. And so it's so necessary. You know, a lot of people ask the question of, is this something I can learn on my own, right? And
Yeah.
the answer is yes, right?
Yep,
Anybody could essentially learn anything on their own.
for sure. Yeah.
But I think that's one of the beautiful things about a boot camp experience is having this kind of condensed experience and being able to have other people who are going through it with you to rely on, bounce ideas off
Yes.
of, and all of that good stuff. So that's
Yeah,
awesome.
absolutely. Like if we ran into a problem with our project, conversing it with one of your partners or your seatmates, like we can resolve that problem in less than 2 minutes. Versus, let's say, if you were on your own, like, and I tried this even before the boot camp when I was preparing for my applications. Like, it took a while, it took hours to figure out what was going on if you don't have like a friend or a peer to kind of go through the difficulty of your coding issue. Um, so I definitely felt that advantage of being in a boot camp and having that cohort or support, because you run into ideas with each other. So that was fun.
Nice. Awesome. So looking back at your experience while you were in the boot camp course, um, we talked about having fears. We talked about some of the just obstacles of being in a new place and
Yeah.
trying to find your way there. But what would you say, I guess, as you were going through the process, was kind of like your biggest challenge, or what was kind of the hardest part about all of it, whether it was the actual
Yeah.
schoolwork itself or the fears? Like, what was the toughest part about doing the boot camp course?
Hmm. Interesting. I'd say it really was the application. I know that's like a non-answer, but I'm gonna try to remember more about like the boot camp experience. But I really
Well,
remember. Yeah. Sorry. Go
I,
ahead.
I will say, I will just interject just to say, as you talk about the application, for anybody who is listening, since then we've definitely updated our application process. So if you are curious about everything that it entails or how to prepare for it, we do have a couple of different blogs on our website. Go to flatironschool.com and check that out.
Nice.
Because,
Nice. Nice.
yeah, no, I think definitely since your kind of time there, we definitely made sure that we've put some resources on the site to
Yeah.
make sure that people have a heads up of what to expect, how to prepare,
Yeah.
and all of that good stuff.
Yeah. And I think when I say difficulty with the application, it was really more of like, how am I going to control my nerves when I'm running
Yeah,
through when I'm running through this proposed solution for a problem that I don't even know yet. It's like you're thinking
yeah,
on your feet, it's something new, you're nervous, it's a phone interview. It was just so difficult. Um, and I think that was the most challenging part for me because I had zero context on what success looked like, for tech candidates or for coding candidates. So I think that's going to be a little helpful if, I think in your blogs they cover that, what would set you up, how to better prepare. And I think that being super new to me, it's just like, gosh, I don't know how to best prepare and put my best foot forward for this one. But in terms of like the bootcamp course, I'm trying to think what was the most difficult. I I mean, I think it was all too new to me, so it was hard to kind
yeah,
of rank which was more difficult. It was all difficult because it's new,
yeah,
and not because the course wasn't taught well. Actually, I felt like I kind of wished, each thing that I've learned in college and in high school was taught the way boot camps taught it, that it's very heavily applications based. Like, you have, short bursts of discussions and lectures or the videos to talk about the theory behind what you're going to do and then immediately do your application. That's been so helpful for me. Like it just ingrains and embeds in my head better. Um, but the toughest part really was like just getting used to whiteboarding interviews. There's no way getting into it. Just like a matter of reps. Just have to put hard work. You have to get used to being uncomfortable. You have to get used to not knowing the answer. You have to get used to stumbling upon your process in front of somebody in a graceful manner, however graceful looks like. It's like, and you have to articulate. You know, Even if it's awkward during the interview, there's awkward silence for sure. There's gonna be pauses. There's gonna be times where you just want to like I don't know, step outside of the room and think on your own, but you can't do that, right? Because you're in an
Right.
interview. So it's just carving out like how to best hack your system into making yourself as comfortable as you can be in moments of pressure for something so new to you and something that you just learned in 12 weeks. I think that was to me the most challenging part of the boot camp because everything else was fun. Like, you get to apply all the things that you've learned, but now it's time to like put this pressure test on you and figure out if you can do it gracefully.
Yeah, that's I can only imagine. Our courses now, I will note, just again for anyone listening,
Yeah,
that they are 15 weeks, but same thing, right? Just a
yeah,
short period of time. You're learning all this new information, and then the beauty of going to a boot camp is this idea that in a short amount of time you can completely change careers. But then
yes,
that becomes kind of a scary thing of, like you said, you've learned this, but it's still so very new in a sense. And then you're already thrust into interviews and going into these spaces. So
yeah.
I can definitely only imagine how stressful that can be. But um, the good news is that you're living proof that you can make it to the other side.
Oh gosh, and the most like I don't know, when you think about the journey, it's really just matter of attempts, and trying to not create the same mistake twice. I think that's just it. It's like just really, really learn. If you fail, like get make sure you take away something from that. Like you write it down or make sure you remember in the next attempt that you have, you just iterate better and better and better. And sometimes, like the progress in the journey is obviously isn't a straight line, right? Like sometimes the LinkedIn apprenticeship was great, but then I had to like take a step back and figure out, okay, like is engineering the right path? And then you start pivoting towards where am I gravitating towards and where are my strengths and coding or tech ability coinciding. Maybe it's product and it's just really being as honest and truthful to what drives you versus these external factors. I think that's also one of the challenges as a bootcamp graduate. It's like because the space that you're getting into is so well, at least to me, it was so foreign and new. I it's just so easy to be carried away by external factors. Like, okay, this is what success looks like. This is what a successful bootcamp graduate looks like, or this is what being successful in tech looks like. And it's so difficult to form that own definition of success in a space that's quite foreign to you. And I think, people along the way would figure out in their journey, like, how to best form that and shape that on their own. It takes time, but it's worth it because you're happy, like you enjoy your journey. You're not being driven by some other factor to get to a random goal that you feel like everybody's trying to reach, but doesn't really fit yours. um so I think that's one of the difficulties, at least to me personally, because I've never worked in a tech company, or kind of had that kind of exposure versus the rest. But yeah, that's been helpful. That really has been helpful, just being honest with what kind of success looks like for you.
Yeah. We touched a little bit on, the fact that you made friends and of course relied on your cohort throughout your journey. Were there any mentors or kind of figures that were able to help guide you? Um, if so, like how did you go about finding somebody like that? And if not,
Yeah.
talk to us about that.
Yeah, let's see. Well, mentors. Well, my first mentors were my teachers in Flatiron, right? Like
Mhm.
they guided me to like right before the whole speed interviews with different possible employers. At that time, they were just trying to pump us up for this next stage and telling us like what, as I mentioned, like how to best prepare yourself for those difficult situations and interviews. But after Flatiron, when I got officially matched with a mentor in the LinkedIn apprenticeship program. So that was cool. So every day,
Nice.
you talk about your project or we talk about what you're going through. And I think that was also one of the things that I could have improved on during that apprenticeship, was just communicating and articulating clearly what gaps I'm finding in my whole experience in the apprenticeship and where I was struggling really. And I think there was this kind of I don't know, pressure to kind of show like, I'm a bootcamp graduate, but I'm fine. Like I'm not gonna crack. I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna break down in this difficult, apprenticeship experience. And I think that kind of took away the opportunity to iterate again, as I mentioned, and improve on your weaknesses or your struggles. But that mentorship really helped because it gave me a good sense of, how they work, how they embed themselves in a team, how success looks like for them, even if it's kind of vague and foreign to me at that time. But then away from the official mentorship, I've met different folks, and this is I'm really grateful for LinkedIn's culture because you know a lot of seniors or even leadership would reach out to you if you need help, right? Or if you need like 15 or 20 minutes to talk about where do you want to go next. And I think that those were one of the crucial conversations I've had after the apprenticeship. I think I had like my last 2 weeks, but then one of the seniors or like folks from the leadership team reached out and was like, hey, do you have 15 or 30 minutes? Let's talk about what would you like to see for your next chapter, like what would you want to do. And I think at the time I was like, I just want to go back to New York and like figure things out and maybe look
Yeah.
for like a smaller company first. Maybe it's just too much or too overwhelming for me. But then I think they did give me, words of wisdom and gems from their experiences too. Like, like they experienced startups and big companies, but they felt like the opportunity to learn, at least for my situation at the time, was to stay. And that was crucial for me. Like I wouldn't know. I had no mentors at that time that would kind of guide me to my next steps. That's why I think it's also important to see the culture of the company that you're getting into, if you kind of have that support or that openness within the company to kind of help new people like me at the time figure things out and find our groove.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I think, you know, with apprenticeships and programs where, it's a learning opportunity as well as, building your
Yeah,
career. I think that that's definitely the way of the future, or what the future should look like.
yeah,
You had said earlier, something like, that you wish that, other kind of stages of education, like high school or college, were taught in a format similar to a boot camp.
yeah,
And I think, as we move forward as humans and as a society, I hope that we recognize some of these things that, not everybody learns the same in the same way.
hmm,
And that by having options where, we're not drawing things out, right? Where you can have options where you can really just like focus on a particular subject matter.
yeah,
And when we're embracing, doing those types of programs coupled with things like apprenticeships,
mm,
that's how people really get to learn and really get to the root of, what they want to do, and to see those things. So I love to hear that. And I love that, as you were entering into the space, you were able to have an apprenticeship program
yeah,
that kind of, would
yeah,
match you up with mentors.
yeah.
Um, because that can make all the difference, right? When you
Does.
have an actual person, right? You can read about things, you can
Hmm.
even, go online and hear people talk about their
Yeah,
experiences, but sometimes without context to anything else about their life,
right.
it falls short of actually having somebody who
I
you
completely
can get to
agree.
know, you can bounce ideas and questions off of,
Yeah,
and they can help to guide you.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So, as you look back at this journey, whether
Oh boy.
it's, the whether it's, while in boot camp or as you were first starting out your career, is there anything that you would change, anything that you would do differently?
Yeah, I think I just speak up more. I think it doesn't mean if you're this unique candidate or you come from this unique pool of talent. But I think at least at my time, like 2016, this was oh gosh, 6 years ago. It's been a
Yeah.
while. And maybe the landscape is different now, but at least back then, I always felt like, oh gosh, wow, I should feel this like sense of gratitude because these tech companies are welcoming us, and they're not, they would gladly pick another candidate from a traditional route with 4 years of computer science, but they picked me. And I think having the kind of disposition wasn't as helpful. And I kind of wish I felt less, I felt like I didn't, you wouldn't really owe the company for hiring you, right? Like you shouldn't feel that way. And it
Right.
shouldn't feel that way even if you graduated from a boot camp, even if you're a self-taught learner, it doesn't matter. Like you did your work, you went through the application and you worked for that
Yeah.
spot. And I think
Yeah.
that whole, sense of gratitude and like, I'm so thankful that you hired me, just like it kind of took away the opportunity to really voice out the gaps that I was experiencing as a first, as I was entering the tech space, and also figuring
Yeah.
out the gaps on my own, like on my own lack of skills too. Just like, okay, like enough of these being like thankful and gratitude, but more like, what is the work to be done, to get to your next step? Like, what are the success metrics at the end of this like what 6 month period or 7 month period of apprenticeship? Like, how does that look like? So I feel like, you know, own it, you deserve it. I think that was kind of what I wish I did more. And also just being honest up front at the start if something doesn't work out. Like, don't be afraid to voice it out because you belong in that company. You deserve, you know, that the conversations at least to be had, with those teams to improve those gaps. And also just not being afraid of standing out. Like you will, everybody at some point would stand out. I think I was really busy trying to blend in, and that kind of made the communication and my goals kind of murky at the time because my goal was like, okay, I'll blend in, I'll speak like them, I'll act like them, and that didn't work for me because that's not how I learned. That's not how I spoke. That's not how I kind of, figure things out. So that kind of it hinders you from getting to what the successful next step looks like because you're so busy trying to blend in and trying to be thankful and having the sense of gratitude. And that's tough to learn, especially if you just joined, right? And especially if you feel like it's not usual for companies to hire folks like me or like anybody from the boot camp then. But eventually you'll learn like, no, you should own it. You should articulate, you
Yeah.
should voice it out, you should speak up. And so that's just a few things I wish I've done differently back then.
Mhm.
um
Yeah.
but overall, I think it's just, yeah, don't be afraid of being bad at things. Everybody's experienced that phase in their lives. And I think you should worry, people should start worrying if they're not bad at certain things, right? At the beginning, at least. It means it's either
Right.
you're in your comfort zone, you're stagnant, where
Mhm.
you're kind of pulling yourself away from opportunities or risks that could kind of take you to the next step of your journey. um, so yeah, just those three things I think I wish I'd really embedded more like clearly in my head and how to go about that tech journey at the start.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. Um, I think, even in other avenues of life or in other industries, I think that's something that a lot of people can resonate with.
Yeah,
Sometimes your head is down and you're focused on certain things, like you said, like gratitude, or even wondering, should I be here, or how did I get here, and feeling like almost, as they
yeah,
say, imposter syndrome.
yeah, yeah.
But those sorts of things can really, consume you,
It does. It
to the
does.
point where other things, like you said, like, making sure that all of your needs are met or every gap is filled,
Hmm.
can sometimes fall off the radar. So for anyone
Right.
listening, that was definitely a golden nugget of advice. Definitely heed to that. So now, what is your favorite part about working in tech?
Oh gosh, I love just learning from so many different folks. Um, in the company because the people that you meet, they're really smart. And I think that's just something that I enjoy, learning from different people, understanding different kinds of methods, how to go about different, methods of solutioning. It just widens your perspective every day in such a speedy manner because we all know the tech space is fast, like really, really fast. I think that's what I enjoy most about this, experience in tech. It's really the people, although it does sound cliche, but like, man, like the amount of learning that I've had just by talking to people for 30 minutes or just by going through a project with them for like a quarter or like, having worked on a specific document for 1 month with them. It's just so much learning that I wouldn't be able to get from some other avenues. And maybe I could, but not as fast as this and not as deep as this. And then second is just, I guess it feels like a playground to me if you're in a tech space. And I think specifically for my role now, it's like so much conceptualization. Like, what do you do with this data and what do you do with this research? And it's obviously teamwork to get it to whether it's resolution or whether it's to launching a new feature, a new product that people would enjoy, whether it's internally in the company or externally. And I think that's just exciting. It's just you're in a playground, you're building things, whether it feels like you're playing with Lego. Just like building different things and figure out, okay, this is the best way, and then you kind of iterate and like redo it and see what's best. So it's really still, as you can notice, it just goes back to building, right? Like however that building is, but building those solutions or building for things, at least personally, had always excited me.
Awesome. Well, I'll ask you two more questions,
Oh wow,
and
okay.
you've kind of touched on this already. So this will kind of wrap things up a bit. But what advice would you have for anyone who's listening or watching right now and is kind of on the fence about joining tech? You know, what would you say to them about how to go about even deciding if they want to?
Gosh, okay. I'm rewinding to 5, 6 years ago and just trying to figure out what was my what was my mindset and my thinking then. I mean, I think this might not be very specific to tech, but it would still be helpful in their decision making. It's like one is the kind of culture and the things that are being made by the different tech companies or movements using technology excite you. If the sense of innovation and building does excite you, then it's a good, why not try it out? And there's really no harm there. Let's say if you figured out you don't want to be an engineer, just like me, like if you didn't want to be implementing code, that's okay. Um, People, I think, forget that the tech companies have so many teams, huge, like organizations or like sub organizations under those companies that is gives an avenue for any kind of interest that you would have, whether it's, let's say, like, videography or like film or I don't know, writing articles or being part of the PR team or the marketing team or sales, or whether it's even customer support or operations, design. It's like the tech company is not just, heavily focused on just coding. And if you feel like
Right.
that is a hindrance to you to even try, entering tech space, you should go for it. Like it shouldn't be a hindrance. Like coding shouldn't be a hindrance. And
Yep.
coding, although I would say attending the Flatiron bootcamp and learning how to code really did help me. It was so foundational because it helped me understand the language in that company, right? And not like, not literally, although you can also take it literally. I understand code and their code base, but just really, no pun intended, but just really understanding the systems that they have, right? And like the
Yeah.
the principles behind how they build things. And it's just so much easier speaking to and working with your team of engineers or your team of tech leads, as you conceptualize things and figure out what's the best thing to bring out to your audience. And I think that's why, to be like, it's always great to have coding background, but if you feel like, you're afraid that you're not the best engineer and you can't be the best engineer, so you won't get into tech companies, like, don't let that stop you. Like, there's so much opportunity out there, and it's really a playground if you treat it as a playground, and you'll have fun.
Awesome. Well, the last question that I have for you is one that we ask all of our guests.
Oh,
Um, what is a quote that you live by? Now, I know I'm putting you on the spot, so if you need a moment to
a
to remember,
quote to
but
live by. Well, it's so
yes.
timely because I have a few. Okay, well, let's see. Oh gosh, that is hard. I think I mentioned this earlier. I don't know if it's a quote, but it's always like this. I always write this down, or I always put this on the top of my to-do list or my agenda of the day, just to remind me. It's like a few things that I should remember is just the fear of regret always outweighs the fear of failure. Like, fail fast,
Wow.
fail forward, fail a couple of times versus not trying. I think that's that's been the common theme in my narrative or in my story, is just doing a couple of countless attempts to get to the next step or figure out what's best for you. Um, but there's nothing worse than staying stuck and just being afraid to get out of your comfort zone. I think whatever hinders growth, whatever keeps you from moving forward or moving to the direction that you want, I think it's best to get out of that, because you deserve it. Like, you deserve that growth. You deserve that enjoyment. You deserve
Yeah.
that trajectory, that
Yeah.
that's available to you. So yeah, always I feel like that fear of regret is always hanging over my head. Of like, okay, if I'm hesitant in doing this, I don't know, meeting with this person or getting into this project, I'm just gonna say, God, I'm gonna regret if I don't do this. I'm just gonna do it. Whether it's gonna be in a graceful manner or not, who knows? I just hope it's graceful, but if it isn't, it's fine. Nobody's gonna
Right.
remember that 5 years
Yeah.
from now. That and I think people deserve that. So I think that's
Yeah.
my quote, if you will.
I love it. That's perfect. Um, wow, this has been such a great conversation.
Awesome.
And I know that there's a lot of people who are really going to enjoy this.
Cool, cool.
Thank you so much for joining me, Krissa.
Sure.
This has been such an enlightening conversation. I really appreciate it. Your story, I'm sure, will really resonate with a lot of people. So thank you so much for sharing with us
Awesome.
today.
Well, thanks for having me. Yeah, I miss Flatiron School. I wish I could visit the campus in New York again. It was such a pivotal moment for me, like joining it. I think anybody who has a chance should join. It's such a, it was one of the things that I'd love to do all over again. Although not the sleepless nights in coding, but it was fun. It was fun. So thanks for having me. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, of course. And really quickly before we let you go, do you have any social media handles or a website or anything that you would like for people to follow you on?
Well, a lot of people reach out on LinkedIn for career advice, or for
Perfect.
tips, or just conversations around work, about tech, or like boot camps at Flatiron School. So you can reach me there. I think it's linkedin.com/in/Krissa Santos. So this is just my, or you can just search for me, Krissa Santos. Like, it should pop up. And yeah, my Instagram is just a bunch of stories about my cat Rocco and my husband. So if you guys want to follow along how
Nice.
a chubbier cat has gone from 7 months to, I don't know how old he is now, but yeah, you feel free to follow my Instagram. It's Krissa Santos too, just to see him. But yeah, if anything about career things and career advice, LinkedIn is the way. I'll be able to respond from there.
Perfect. Awesome. Thanks again. And for everyone listening and watching, make sure that you follow Flatiron School as well across all social media platforms: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn as well. And of course, hit that subscribe button if you are watching us on YouTube. Thank you so much. That's another episode, and we'll see you guys next
Awesome.
time.
Thank you.
Bye.